church, thanks so much for joining us today. Please stand and let's worship together.
I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was mine too, till I met you. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was mine too, till I met you. When you called my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul, and now your freedom is all that I know. The old made new, Jesus, when I met you. When you called my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. Needed rescue, my sin was heavy, the chains break at the weight of your glory. Needed shelter, I was an orphan, and now you call me a citizen of heaven. I was broken, you were my healing, and now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you called my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You rescue, my sin was heavy, the chains break at the weight of your glory. Fullness of eternal promise, stirring in your sons and daughters, earth revealing heaven's wonders. Spirit come, Spirit come. What you spoke is now unfolding. All
all your children shall behold it. Dreams awaken in this moment. Spirit come, Spirit come. Pour it out, let your love run over. Here and now, let your glory fill this house. Pour it out, let your love run over. Here and now, let your glory fill this house. Now the world awaits your presence, and this power is within us. We will rise to be your witness. Spirit come, Spirit come. Pour it out, let your love run over. Here and now, let your glory fill this house. Pour it out, let your love run over. Here and now, let your glory fill this house. Tongues of fire, testifying of the Son, one desire. Spirit come, speak revival. Prophesy like it is done, one desire. Spirit come, Spirit Let our hearts continue burning, for our King is soon returning. As we hold to this assurance, Spirit come, Spirit come, Spirit come, Spirit come. Pour it out, let your love run over. Here and now, let your glory fill this house. Pour it out, let your love run over. Here and now, let your glory fill this house.
That your Spirit would come, that He would pour your love into our hearts, that He would bring that renewal and that refreshing that we're so desperately longing for and that we so desperately need. We need you more than the air we breathe, more than the food we eat. We need you above all. We are bankrupt and hopeless without you. So we pray that now your Spirit would come, that He would open our hearts, open our ears, open our eyes. We would hear you and see you, that we would know the great love that you have for us, and that we would love you in return. Thank you for hearing our prayers, and we thank you for answering us. We ask these things in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. Good morning. Why don't you turn around and welcome someone to Horizons today?
We believe in Jesus Christ. We believe in the Holy Spirit, and He's given us new life. We believe in the crucifixion. We believe that he conquered death. We believe in the resurrection. And his
Well, good morning, my friends. I'm glad to see you all survived the great heat wave of yesterday. No one in here is burnt to a crisp, right? Y'all made it. You stayed cool. You're all right, right? I tell you what, I was struggling yesterday, y'all. Woo, doggy. My delicate complexion could not handle the heat. So I say that I'd take a hot day over a cold day any day of the week. I hate winter. I don't know why I live here. Who said that? What? Get out of here. Get. It's July. Stop it. Hey, if we haven't met yet, my name is Josiah. I'm the assistant campus pastor here at our Lost Creek campus. We're so glad that you are here worshiping with us today. When you walked in, you hopefully received a bulletin. Looks a little bit like that, or looks exactly like that, I should say. Inside there, we got a few items that we go over every week, like our connection card. If you would be so kind to fill this out, either on this physical card or in the app, if you're so inclined to do it that way, and then drop this card in the bucket on your way out if you're going to do it that way. If you are new or we have not yet had the pleasure of meeting you, what we'd love for you to do is to fill out this connection card. And at the end of the service, take it over to our welcome area, over there to your left where that sign just lit up. You bring that connection card, we'll give you a gift in exchange, and we'll also just take 2 or 3 minutes to introduce ourselves and show you how you can get connected here at the church, all right? So if you're new, we haven't met you yet, hope to meet you over there at the end of the service. You also find a handout so you can follow along with today's message. We're continuing our Countercurrent series in the Gospel of Luke, and my father will be up to deliver that very shortly. So if you want to follow along, there is a note taker in there for you. And the final thing you'll find in your bulletin is this offering envelope. We are able to do all the awesome things that we do here at the church and abroad because of your financial generosity and partnership. So thank you for doing that. And if you'd like to continue to partner with us financially, you can do so any of the 4 ways that should be popping up on that slide right there. Just follow any of those instructions if you'd like to give, and we will thank you very much for your generosity. My final announcement is over to my left and your right. As always, there's someone in our prayer room. So if you have a need and you want some prayer at any point during the service, please feel free to walk over to the prayer room, and our prayer volunteer will be happy to pray with you. All right? We have one very quick video announcement about our cry rooms, and then my father will be up to deliver the message.
Hi, moms and dads. I'm Pastor Kelly, and we want to let you know about the classes going on right now for your kids. If you have your kids with you in the service, we'd like to invite them to come experience the fun and learn the important life lessons from the Bible. We also offer nursery for infants and for toddlers. If your child gets fussy with you here in the sanctuary, please be courteous to those around you and use one of our cry rooms in the back of the sanctuary. You'll be able to see and hear everything, and your kids can enjoy the extra freedom. And now, here's your lead pastor, Quint Pitts.
So good morning, everyone. Before we welcome in the folks from our other campuses, let me talk to just the Lost Creek campus for just a minute. We've got a series coming up called Church at the Movies, and it's going to be a fun series. We're going to actually be taking clips. We'll be using clips from some of your favorite movies to illustrate biblical truths. We're going to be preaching from the Bible. Don't get me wrong. We're not just on the movies. But we're going to have a fun environment here. We're going to have characters out there, photo ops with stormtroopers, maybe Chewbacca or Darth Vader or some of those guys. But we need some guys that are willing to dress up in the costumes to do that. I think right now we need still about 6 people willing to volunteer to do something like that on one weekend, okay? You don't have to do it all 6 weeks of the series, but one weekend. So if you'd like to help us with that, just write on that connection card, Church at the Movies, and make sure your name and your phone number are on there, and we'll get in contact with you about that. That's going to be fun. It starts August 24, August 25, that weekend, okay? Now that is a perfect opportunity for you to invite non-Christian people to church, okay? The reason we're doing this, we're going to create a fun environment. We're going to give away some free things. But it's the whole idea of it is to bring in people who don't go to church. So if you got friends, neighbors, people you go to school with, people you work with that don't have a relationship with God, or they used to have a relationship with God and they kind of walked away, this is a wonderful opportunity for you to invite them in, okay? So that's August 24, 25, and we'd love to have your help if you're interested in helping us with that. All right. So let me welcome in those of you worshiping with us at our other campuses and micro campuses around the great state of West Virginia. We are glad you're here. On July the 2nd, 1863, more than 160,000 soldiers were locked in a death struggle for the life of our nation. We had 90,000 troops from the Union side, the federal side, the boys in blue up north. They were fighting 70,000 Confederates, boys in gray from the south. The northern men were fighting to preserve these United States of America. The southern men were fighting to start a new nation, the birth of a new nation called the Confederate States of America. Now that battle, like a lot of the big, grand, major events in history, and if you know anything about history, you know this to be true, that battle hinged on several, about a dozen, small unit actions. All right? Great events in history often turn on tiny little hinges, and the Battle of Gettysburg was one of those battles. In fact, on July the 2nd, in the smoky twilight of the second day, it was a 3-day battle, the second day of the battle, July the 2nd, 1863, in the smoky twilight, a brigade of Alabama soldiers from the south, they stepped off from their lines and they started walking towards the Union Center up on Cemetery Ridge. What they didn't know, because they couldn't see because of all the smoke, they didn't know they were heading directly for a half-mile wide gap in the Union lines. The reason there was a half-mile wide gap in the Union lines is because they kept having to send reinforcements to the southern end of the battlefield and left this yawning gap. Those Alabamans, 1,400 of them, every time they ran across some Union resistance, they swept it out of their way. The Union soldiers were running for their lives. There was the only thing between those guys and the top of that ridge was about 400 yards. They only had to walk another quarter of a mile, and they would be in that gap. They would split the Union Army into two, and they probably would have caused the Union defeat of that battle. And if they would have lost the Battle of Gettysburg, almost all historians are unanimous, if Gettysburg had been lost, the Union would have lost the war, and we would get out our passports every time we traveled to Virginia. Different nations. Big deal, right? Big deal. Well, as those Alabamans approached, there's 1,400 of them. They're just marching. They're just walking right towards that gap. Again, they can't see that there's a gap up there because of all the smoke. As they're nearing their objective, suddenly, out of nowhere, 262 Union soldiers are running towards them, bayonets leveled, charging them. Now, this is how the artist Don Troiani visualized that. 262 men from the 1st Minnesota Infantry Regiment charging against 1,400 brigade of Alabamans. Now, folks, I don't care about who you are. That's audacious. That is an act of audacity. Wonderful definition for audacity is bold, daring, especially when it comes to disregard for conventional thought. Well, there's nothing conventional about 262 men charging at 1,400. They were outnumbered 4-1. They knew what it meant to charge that line. They knew that it was suicide. Now, my question is, let me just read you some quotes from some of the men who actually managed to survive. Some did survive the charge. Lieutenant William Loughran was there that day. He managed to survive, and here's what he said. He said, every man realized in an instant what that order meant, the order to charge that 1,400-man enemy column. He said, every man knew in an instant what it meant, death or wounds to us all, the sacrifice of the regiment to gain a few minutes to save the position and probably save the battlefield. Sergeant Alfred Carpenter also survived the charge, and he said, bullets whistled past us, shells screeched over us, comrade after comrade dropped from the ranks, but on the line went. No one took a second look at a fallen companion. We had no time to weep. Now, my question is this. Where does that kind of audacity come from? Where does that come from? Would any of us do that? Well, one thing that leaps to mind, audacity comes from personal courage, right? I mean, you have to be a pretty courageous person to do what they did. Just to run headlong, knowing that what's going to happen to you when you get there. Just take off. They just took off at a sprint, running towards the 1,400 enemy soldiers. Personal courage. Belief in a higher ideal is one source of audacity. I mean, these guys were true believers. This is the third year of the war. All the shirkers and unbelievers had already gone home or deserted. These guys really believed in what they were fighting for. They believed in preserving the Union. They believed in ending slavery, and they were making that charge because of that, probably. How about brotherhood? Brotherhood. Those of you who served in the military, you know what I'm talking about, especially if you served in combat. There's this brotherhood, this bond that takes place between men who fight in those kind of situations. And so if my brother's going to go forward in this charge, he's not going without me. I'm going with him. All of those things are probably true as sources of audacity. But those are the ones that we think of automatically, I think, when we read stories like this. But there's at least one. There's one source of audacity that no one ever thinks about. Nobody's ever written a book about this as a source of audacity. Try this, all right? Just try this. Colonel William Colville and the 262 men of the 1st Minnesota Infantry Regiment leveled their bayonets and charged at that 1,400 enemy line because General Winfield Scott Hancock ordered them to charge that line. You see, the men of the 1st Minnesota understood authority, and they submitted themselves to authority. Does anybody here just leap to mind that one reason that people are audacious, one reason for audacity is because of authority? Most of us don't, right? We don't couple authority with audacity. In fact, we Americans don't even like the word authority. Our country was born out of hatred for a tyrannical authority in Great Britain. Our nation was born rebelling against authority. And we Americans don't think about authority much. We don't like authority very much. And so when we come to stories like we're going to read today here in the Bible, Luke chapter 7, we don't really couple that with Jesus very often, the idea of authority. But I'm here to tell you, here's what Hancock was trying to do, all right? General Winfield Scott Hancock was trying to buy time. He had another brigade of Union soldiers coming up from the rear to plug this gap. But he needed 5 minutes for them to get here. They were on the run. They were running as fast as they could to get there, but he needed 5 minutes. So he ordered that Minnesota regiment to their doom in order to buy 5 minutes. There's how the artist Dale Gallen pictures General Hancock giving Colonel Colville the order to charge that line. Those guys did not hesitate. Eyewitnesses from General Hancock's staff said that Colonel Colville, when he got the order, turned around to his men and said, "Fix bayonets, charge at the double quick, march," and they took off at a run. No hesitation. No hesitation. Knowing what it would mean to them, they suffered 82% casualties that day. Only 47 men got back unscathed. And they bought not just 5 minutes, they managed to buy 15 minutes because they stunned that Alabama brigade. I mean, you can imagine, you're just walking along and you've already covered 3/4 of a mile of ground. Nobody's standing in your way. Every Union soldier's running away. And all of a sudden, you see a formation of men running at you with their bayonets stuck out at you. It stunned them and it stopped them for 15 minutes. And in that 15 minutes, they saved the battle, they saved the field, they saved probably the war and probably the nation. Pitts, that's nice, dude. That's really nice, especially for you history buffs. But what does it have to do with me? It happened 150 years ago, guy. Why do I care about what happened 150 years ago? I'm not in the military. I'm not charging down some slope to stop some Alabamans from destroying our country. What's that got to do with me? I'm glad you asked that question, because here's what I think. As we look at this story from Luke chapter 7 today, I think it's going to give you not only new hope. I mean, hope is good. Right? Hope is good. But it's going to give you a new source to draw from. Let me just ask you something. Do any of you feel like you are under attack today? And before you say no, let me just ask this. Any of you feel like you're trying to defend something today that is under attack? Do any of you feel like perhaps your marriage is under attack? Any of you feel outnumbered today? These guys were outnumbered 5-1. Any of you feel outnumbered today? Any of you feel like maybe the situation's in doubt? Not sure how the outcome's going to go? Any of you feel that way? Any of you feel like your kids are under attack, under assault? Does anybody here think that maybe my finances are under attack? Anybody here got the demons of depression closing in and they're outnumbering you 5-1? Is there anyone here who's thought about their dreams lately? Have you thought about your dreams? When you were a younger man, you had dreams. When you were a younger woman, you had dreams. What happened to those dreams? Were all those dreams killed off one by hidden snipers? If you said yes to any of those things, if you were in school, maybe college, university, or high school, do you ever feel like your Christian faith is under constant assault? If you said yes to any of those, I think today's talk is going to be very helpful to you. And the reason I think it's going to be helpful is because it's going to give you hope, but it's also going to give you another source that we never think of. It's going to give you another source to draw from the next time you are under attack, all right? So, take a look, if you got your Bibles with you. We're going to learn something fascinating about God, by the way, I think, in this story. This is one of my favorite New Testament stories. Luke chapter 7, verse 1. We're picking up right where Josiah left off last week, all right? We're going through the Gospel of Luke. Luke chapter 7, verse 1. When Jesus had finished saying all this in the hearing of the people, what's he talking about? He's talking about the Sermon on the Mount, right? When he had finished saying the Sermon on the Mount, we spent the last 3 weeks here as a church looking at the Sermon on the Mount. When he had finished saying all this in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. So he goes back to Capernaum. Capernaum has become Jesus' unofficial headquarters, okay? He spends almost all of his time when he's not traveling, he spends it there at Capernaum. Look, he's going to be introduced to an unnamed centurion from the Roman army when he gets back to Capernaum. Now, a centurion is a professional Roman soldier who commands 100-ish Roman soldiers, okay? It's not always exactly 100, but it's around 100. If you've served in the military, it's the equivalent of a company commander today, probably. Closest thing we have to it, all right? And this Roman official, we don't get his name. We do not know his name, but he understands something. He gets it. In fact, if you're taking notes, write this down. He understands authority, and that helps him understand who Jesus is. Authority. Again, we don't always couple Jesus with authority. We don't always couple Jesus with understanding of authority, but this guy's insight into Jesus, and this man, this Roman centurion, this official, he's not a Jew, folks. He's not a peace-loving rabbi or a peace-loving fisherman. He's a soldier. He's a warrior. And he understands Jesus better than anybody because he understands authority. We're going to discover that as we go along. Let's read verse 2. There, a centurion's servant, whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. The centurion heard of Jesus. I mean, he lives in the same town that Jesus uses as his headquarters. He's stationed there in Capernaum. The centurion heard of Jesus. He's probably heard Jesus talk. He's probably heard him teach. If he hasn't, he's heard about Jesus' teachings and he's heard about Jesus' miracles. And he sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him, "This man deserves," you might want to underline that or circle that, "this man deserves to have you do this because he loves our nation and he's built our synagogue." I mean, that's pretty amazing that a Roman soldier, a Roman official, not only is he kind, but he's generous. He's donated the money to get the synagogue in Capernaum built, the one that Jesus teaches out of when he teaches out of a synagogue. All right? Jesus, this centurion, let's talk about the centurion for a minute. This guy is a man's man. He's a dude's dude. He's a guy's guy. All right? He is a warrior. He's not just a warrior. He leads other warriors into battle. Now, I don't know how that measures up with you because a lot of people, there's a misconception in our culture that Jesus is fine for women and children, but men aren't interested in Jesus. Now, if that's true in your mind, if that's somewhere in the back of your head that it's okay for my wife to get excited about Jesus, it's okay for my kids to get excited about Jesus, but I'm a man and I can't get excited about Jesus. That is a total misconception and understanding. If you feel that way, we preacher types have done a horrible job portraying the New Testament. You read the Gospels and you read how men respond to Jesus. They don't respond to Jesus half-heartedly and coldly because they think he's just for women and children. This is a man's man, and he is very interested in Jesus. He's a dude's dude. It's one of the reasons that I am so concerned as a pastor and just as an American. I'm so concerned about the craziness, the foolishness is the only way I can describe it, around gender in our culture. It is utter foolishness. If you've been paying attention, it's nuts. They're trying to undo the last vestige of truth, You bear God's image in your gender. If you're a man, you bear God's image differently than the way your wife or some woman bears God's image. Both men and women bear God's image, but we bear God's image differently. That is truth. And now they're wanting to say there's not just men and women, there's 17 different genders, and there's shades of it, and it's not black and white, it's not true or false. It's nonsense, and it's foolishness, and if we continue down this road, it's going to kill our country. It will kill it. So some men in our church have been really concerned about this for a long time. And so they decided, at the beginning of this year, we're going to start something to try to help boys. I mean, boys are the target of all this, little boys. They're saying boys can't be boys, You're not allowed to, if you're a boy, you can't play with toy guns, and you can't be like a warrior. God put that in that little boy's heart. Every man carries around some core desires. Two of those core desires are an adventure to live. Man, men love adventure. It is oxygen for their souls. Every man has that desire. Every man has the desire to fight a great battle. And I don't mean physically fighting a war necessarily. I'm talking about giving your life to a great cause. You want to feel like you've lived for something. When you're done, you've made a difference in his life. It could be in the business world, corporate world. It could be in the sports world. But you want to feel like, man, I'm making a difference, and I'm out there for a great cause. Every man is born that way. Boys, I don't care what you do to a boy, he's going to figure out a way to turn something into a gun. Watch boys play. Watch them play. And my boys was the same way. They'd pick up sticks and they'd turn those into rifles, I think some of the first noises Josiah made was pow, 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 You can't take that out of them because God put that there. There was a time a few years ago, and if you were part of this, don't get me wrong, I'm not picking on you, but there was a time when a lot of moms were concerned, we don't want our boys playing with toy guns because they're going to turn violent. Well, I thought, well, why don't you just emasculate the kid and get it over with, Just emasculate him. That's what Paul said in Galatians. Don't get mad at me for using that word. It's in Galatians. We cannot do. My boys went from guns, though, lightsabers. They became great Star Wars fans. They wanted lightsabers. Everything was a lightsaber. Didn't matter what it was a lightsaber. You can't take that out of a kid. So this Trail Life program, these men in our church said, we're going to start a scouting and adventure program for boys that lets boys be boys. And doesn't say you got to turn more girl. You don't have to become more effeminate. You don't have to lose your boyhood. You don't have to sit there and be still. We're going to take you out and turn you loose, and we're going to let you be a boy. Trail Life is starting September the 8th. And if you have a boy from kindergarten to 12th grade, man, I hope you'll be a part of that. But we need men. We've got about 6 or 7 slots for men who want to say, you know what, I want to make a difference in these kids' lives. I want to make a difference in these boys' lives, and I'll be a part of that. If you're interested in that, come and talk to me after the church service, or write Trail Life on your card somewhere. We'll get in touch with you. Let me just show you a real quick video about Trail Life. So that's Trail Life. We're going to start September 8th, and I'd love for your kids to be a part of that. I'd love for any men who think that's part of what God's called them to do, join us on that, okay? But here we get a picture in Luke chapter 7. We get a picture of a real man, a man's man. He's a warrior. He's well known. He's successful. He works for the Roman government. He is a Roman official, and some would say the Romans are, they're right now in control of Israel. Some people would say not just in control, but they're oppressing the Jewish people. But not this guy. I mean, this guy could be a real jerk, couldn't he? He's a Roman official. He could do anything he wants and get away with it. He's without restraint. And this man, instead of being a jerk with his power, he's kind and he's generous. He builds their synagogue for them, which is pretty amazing. But guess what? When he asked these religious Jews to go and talk to Jesus, the religious leaders, like almost all religious folks, get it completely wrong. Do you remember what they said to him? Remember what they said to Jesus? This man deserves. He deserves for you to come and heal his servant. Really? You see, that's what religion gets that completely backwards. Religion always gets this wrong, because religion's always keeping score, you see. So if I sin, if I'm a religious person and I sin, well, I've got to figure out some way to pay God for that sin, right? So I've got to go out and do a bunch of good work. I got to go out and do a bunch of good deeds. I got to go to church 3 times a week. I've got to go to purgatory and burn off some sin there. I got to go to karma. I got to figure out my karma. I got to maybe be reincarnated 3 or 4 times, turn into a bug for a while in order to pay for my sin. Or God's going to make me suffer to pay for my sin. Folks, it does not work that way. You cannot. I don't care how many good deeds you do. I don't care how much time you spend in purgatory. I don't care how many reincarnations you go through. You will never pay your sin debt. You don't have to, because Jesus did it. That's what he was doing on the cross. And they get the same thing wrong on the other side of the coin. If I'm a religious person, I start doing good stuff, right? I'm going to church every time it's open. I'm cracking the Bible, 4 or 5 times a day. I'm praying 4 or 5 times a day. I start getting this idea that I'm owed by God. I don't owe God anymore. Now God owes me. So every time I pray, he's got to answer the prayer the way I want him to. Every time I need to have some good things happen in my life, God, and you owe me. I've been going to church. You owe me. Religious people are always keeping score, and none of that works. None of that works. Jesus said, I'll take care of your sin debt, and I don't owe you a thing. But he does give us things. He gives us gifts of grace. And what is grace? Grace is unearned, unmerited, unowed favor. The religious leaders get it all wrong, but it doesn't faze Jesus. He goes with them. And I want you to see how this centurion, this Roman soldier, he's not a rabbi. He hasn't studied at all the great libraries. He gets it. He understands authority, and that not only helps him understand Jesus, it helps him understand himself too. Write down if you're taking notes. It helps him to understand who he is. Luke chapter 7, verse 6. So Jesus went with them. He's not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I know I deserve this and everything, because the Jews have told me I deserve it. Is that what it says? No. He knows, the Jews might have it wrong, the religious folks might have it wrong, but he knows he doesn't deserve squat from God. And it's because he understands authority that he knows he doesn't deserve anything from God. He says, Lord, don't trouble yourself. I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. I'm not even worthy to have you come into my house. Where does that come from? I don't know if you've read much history about the Romans, but they were rather arrogant people, especially when they were in an occupying and oppressed, subservient culture. The Romans had no respect for Jesus and the Jews. They didn't respect Jews. In fact, usually, if you had an encounter with Romans and Jews, it would go like this. Hey, Jew, don't come into my house because I don't want you polluting my house. So where in the world does a Roman, not just a Roman, but a Roman soldier, not just a Roman soldier, but a Roman soldier who's an officer, where does he get the idea that Jesus is somehow so far above him that he doesn't even deserve him to have him in his house? Because that Roman soldier understands authority. He knows that he has authority over about 100-ish troops. And he knows that he has authority over the town of Capernaum, but he knows that Jesus has authority over everything. And he's way above the centurion's pay grade. Way above. He gets it. He understands authority. Write this down if you're taking notes. He understands authority, and that produces an audacious faith in Jesus. You talk about audacity. You talk about daring. You talk about bold. You talk about something that's the opposite of conventional thought. We've got a Roman warrior here who has more faith in his big toe than the Jewish leaders that are there. Those Jewish leaders don't get Jesus at all. The ones who studied the scriptures, the ones that are looking for the Messiah, they do not get Jesus at all, but this warrior, this Roman soldier, gets him more than anybody else. Look at what happened. He said, that is why I did not even consider myself worthy. This is the centurion talking. I did not consider myself to be worthy to come to you, but say the word. He says to Jesus, you don't have to be here in my house. Just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. And I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. And I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. Wow. What a remarkable understanding of Jesus. This guy is light years ahead of everybody else in the Gospel of Luke in his understanding of Jesus, and he's not even a Jew. And the only difference between the Roman and the Jews is that this Roman, because he's a warrior, he understands authority like nobody else. He knew he exercised considerable authority over his soldiers. He understood that Jesus commanded authority and has majesty over everything else. Everything. He gets it. He gets it. Write this down. His audacious faith astonishes Jesus. Now, let me ask you something. Those of you who are Bible students, students of the Gospels, how many times do you see Jesus astonished? How many times? There's twice that the New Testament records Jesus being astonished. Once he was astonished by the lack of faith in his hometown Nazareth. And the other one is this story here in Luke chapter 7. Only one time is Jesus astonished in the positive way of being amazed about something. And it's not because some Jew did something amazing. It's not because some rabbi did something amazing. It's because a Roman warrior did something amazing. Look at verse 9. When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him. And turning to the crowd that was following him, he said, I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel. Now just think about that for a minute. Think about all the things that Jesus has witnessed and is going to witness in the Gospels. Things that astonish you and me. I mean, just for example, all 12 of the guys that are his disciples, all 12 of those guys left professions in order to follow Jesus. To me, that's astonishing. But there's no record of Jesus being astonished. How about this one? We just read this not too many weeks ago. Luke chapter 5, I think, is where the friends of the lame man, they come and they break through that guy's roof. Do you remember that? To get this man so he could get in a position where Jesus could heal him. Do you remember that story? I mean, to me, that's astonishing, you know. They can't get to Jesus the conventional way. They climb up on the roof. They drag the lame man up there. They bust through the roof. That's astonishing to me. But there's no record of Jesus being astonished. Peter, for crying out loud, Peter gets out of a boat in a storm-tossed sea and walks on the stinking water. That, to me, is astonishing. But Jesus wasn't astonished by that. The only time you see in the Gospels Jesus being astonished by something positive, Luke chapter 7. Doesn't that tell you something fascinating about God? Use your imaginations. We're seeing God walk through the pages of the story. This is Jesus. He's God in the flesh. And what astonishes in him? What really gets his attention? What really amazes him is this audacious faith of this Roman soldier. I used to several years ago, I took my kids to North Bend State Park a lot. Anybody know where North Bend State Park is? Over in Ritchie County? We used to love to go there because there wasn't a lot of people. It was kind of remote. And kids could run around like crazy people. And, oh, by the way, another really cool thing, they had old-fashioned playground equipment.